I never imagined the day would come when two armed deputies would march up to our secluded mountain cabin, hands near their holsters, eyes hard, demanding my wife to step outside with her hands where they could see them. The men stood tall on our wooden porch, tension crackling in the mountain air, as they informed us of a reported break-in and trespassing complaint. Standing smugly behind them, wearing a badge-covered blazer and that insufferable smirk, was Karen Peton, the self-declared queen of Pine Ridge County's HOA. Sarah, ever the calm one, kept her voice steady even as her fingers trembled slightly. "This is our property," she said. But Karen wasted no time stepping forward, her voice oozing false sympathy as she rattled off accusations. According to her, we were squatters. She waved documents she claimed proved our land fell under the HOA's control, insisting we hadn't filed any paperwork or paid any dues. The lead deputy, a man whose salt and pepper hair hinted at long years of dealing with nonsense, turned to us. He asked for proof of ownership. Without hesitation, Sarah reached into her back pocket and handed him a neatly folded document. It was the deed, certified, signed, and dated. The cabin, inherited from her Uncle Robert, had been hers for 3 months. The deputy scanned it and raised his eyes to Karen, now clearly less confident. "This shows Mrs. Mitchell as the legal owner," he said flatly. Karen's expression unraveled in real time, smugness collapsing into confusion, then panic. The deputy's tone sharpened. "Can you explain why you reported her for trespassing on her own land?" Karen stammered, her words tripping over each other as she tried to claw her way back to credibility. But this was just the beginning of her fall. 3 months earlier, we had sat in a Denver law office, stunned into silence. Sarah's uncle, a lifelong forest ranger, had passed and left her his sanctuary, a handcrafted log cabin nestled on 5 untouched acres of Colorado wilderness. Lakefront views, towering pines, and a fireplace that had warmed generations. The attorney had slid the paperwork across his polished desk and confirmed it: no mortgages, no liens, and most importantly, land that predated any local homeowners association. We left with dreams as wide as the Rockies and a truck full of supplies to start a new chapter. That first weekend was magic. We wandered the property like kids at summer camp, picking spots for a vegetable garden, talking about building a new deck, and soaking in the clean air and endless trees. But then we started noticing them, little signs nailed to trees and posts: Pine Ridge Lakeside HOA, community standards enforced. Sarah frowned. Uncle Robert had never mentioned an HOA. I brushed it off, probably applied to those prefab homes further down the hill. After all, this cabin had stood here since the 60s. A week later, Karen Peton entered our lives with the subtlety of a wrecking ball. We were cleaning up old lumber when a pristine Lexus SUV cruised up our gravel drive like it belonged on a dealership lot. Out stepped a woman in her 50s, hair sculpted into an immovable helmet of blonde, clipboard in hand and authority dripping from her tone. She introduced herself as the president of the HOA and wasted no time pulling out an iPad, swiping through names. Ours wasn't there. According to her, every property near Pine Ridge Lake was under HOA rule, and we'd already racked up violations: lumber pile, grass height, bird feeder. Sarah's polite smile froze. "With all due respect, this land has been in my family for over 40 years. Karen's laugh was sharp and cold. "That's what they all say," she replied, tapping away on her device. She listed fines, fees, and mandatory board meetings like she was issuing royal decrees. Before we could protest, she spun on her heel and drove away, leaving a storm of dust and disbelief behind. From that moment, she became a shadow over our every day. Weekly surprise inspections, passive-aggressive notes taped to our door, constant nitpicking, from firewood stacking methods to the inappropriate size of the American flag hanging on our porch. Even our old pickup truck was apparently bringing down property values. Sarah was livid, but I was already on my laptop, digging into the HOA's history. What I found was more than unsettling, it was ammunition. And Karen had no idea what was coming. The Pine Ridge Lakeside HOA had only been around for 8 years, created to govern a sprawling development of McMansions clustered along the lake's south shore. Our cabin, however, sat quietly on the north shore, up a private gravel road that had existed since the 1950s. I showed Sarah the zoning maps and county records I had pulled up on my laptop. The evidence was clear: our property was designated as rural residential, and it was never included in the HOA's jurisdiction. Sarah's eyes lit up with relief and determination. Karen Peton had no authority here. None at all. So, the next time she appeared, strutting up our driveway with a thick stack of citations in hand, we were ready. Her expression was locked in that familiar mix of superiority and outrage. "I've been more than patient," she declared, shoving the papers at me. "These are your formal citations, $3,000 in fines and a mandatory disciplinary hearing next Tuesday." I didn't take the papers. Instead, I met her gaze. "Mrs. Peton, we've done our research. This property isn't part of your HOA. You have no jurisdiction over us." Her face flushed red with indignation. "That's where you're wrong," she snapped. "I've been president of this HOA for 6 years. I know the boundaries. Your uncle may have gotten away with breaking the rules because of his age, but you won't." Sarah stepped forward, firm and unshaken. "Then show us the official HOA maps that include our property." Karen's jaw tightened. "Those are confidential documents. Only board members can view them." I nodded. "Then we'll request them directly from the county. In the meantime, please stop entering our property. It's trespassing." Karen's laugh was bitter. "Trespassing? I'm conducting official HOA business. But fine, have it your way. Just don't be surprised when the sheriff gets involved." She turned on her heel and stormed back to her Lexus, snapping photos of our cabin as she went. Something in her demeanor sent a chill through me. I had a gnawing sense that this was far from over. 3 weeks later, things escalated. I had driven back to Denver for a work meeting, leaving Sarah behind to continue our renovations. She planned to spend the afternoon painting the kitchen cabinets, something we'd been meaning to do since we moved in. Around 2 p.m., my phone rang. It was Sarah, but when I answered, it wasn't her voice I heard first. The background was filled with police chatter, static, and raised voices. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but I could feel the tension humming beneath. "James, you need to come back. Karen called the police and told them I broke into the cabin." My grip on the steering wheel tightened as I veered onto the highway, heart pounding. "I'm fine," she continued before I could speak. "The deputies are here, and I showed them the deed." "But James," she told them I was a dangerous squatter. They approached with their hands on their weapons. The drive home was agony. 90 minutes of mental chaos. When I finally reached the cabin, 2 sheriff's vehicles sat in our driveway next to Karen's ever-spotless Lexus. Sarah stood on the porch, deed in hand, speaking with the officers. Karen lingered nearby, arms crossed, lips pressed into a smug line. I approached the group, forcing my voice to stay even. "Officer, I'm James Mitchell, Sarah's husband. Can someone tell me what's happening?" The lead deputy, who introduced himself as Deputy Harrison, looked like a man who'd had a long day. "Mr. Mitchell, Mrs. Peton called 911 reporting a break-in at this address. She stated she had documentation proving the property was under HOA control, and your wife was trespassing." He glanced toward Karen, who met his gaze with defiance. "However," he continued, "your wife provided clear proof of ownership. The deed is in her name, properly recorded with the county 3 months ago." Karen's confidence cracked, her voice rising. "They haven't paid any HOA fees, haven't attended any meetings. They're in total violation of," "Ma'am," the deputy cut her off, his patience thinning, "whether or not they're part of your HOA is a civil issue. What I'm concerned about is that you placed a false emergency call about a break-in. That's a serious misuse of 911 services. Karen turned pale. Her mouth moved, but the words were garbled. I genuinely believed, the HOA records show what? Sarah's voice was sharp, her eyes locked on Karen. That you've been harassing people who aren't even in your jurisdiction. That you've been trespassing on our land for weeks. Deputy Harrison raised his hand to defuse the growing heat. Mrs. Peton, I suggest you confirm your HOA boundaries before making further accusations. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, if she continues this behavior, you're within your rights to file a harassment complaint. As the deputies prepared to leave, Deputy Harrison pulled me aside. His voice lowered, just out of Karen's earshot. Between you and me, he said, this isn't the first time we've had problems with Mrs. Peton or her HOA. You might want to talk to your neighbors. That evening, Sarah and I sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the mountains, the adrenaline finally ebbing from our veins. Her voice was calm but firm. We can't let this go. She could have gotten me hurt, maybe even killed. What if I didn't have the deed on me? I nodded, already planning our next steps. First thing tomorrow, we're installing security cameras. Every inch of this property will be under surveillance. Sarah agreed. And we're hiring a lawyer. A good one. Property law, HOA disputes. The works. By the end of the week, we had turned our fear into action. 8 4K cameras now monitored every corner of our cabin and yard. Then we started visiting our neighbors, and what we learned was just the tip of the iceberg. Down the road, our neighbors began sharing their own horror stories. She tried to fine us $3,000 for having the wrong color shutters, Ellen Brewster told us, shaking her head. We've lived here since 1995, long before her HOA even existed. Mike Garza, whose family had owned a lakeside cabin for 3 generations, showed us a thick folder of bogus fines. She keeps insisting my property is part of the HOA, he said, but I've never signed anything. And the county confirmed I'm not within their boundaries. She just won't stop. The real breakthrough came when we met Dorothy Chen, an 80-year-old widow who'd retired from the county's planning department. As she adjusted her glasses and pulled out a set of aging maps, her memory was sharp. I remember when that HOA was formed, she said. The boundaries were very specific, just the new development on the South Shore. Everything else was grandfathered in as rural residential. She leaned in, her voice dropping. But I've heard whispers that the maps the HOA keeps on file don't match the official county records. Might be worth looking into. With this new information in hand, we met with Patricia Hawkins, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney in her 40s who specialized in property disputes. As we recounted everything, Karen's citations, the false 911 call, the harassment, Patricia's interest grew. She jotted notes methodically on a legal pad. False emergency reports, ongoing harassment, trespassing, and if the HOA maps were altered to misrepresent boundaries, that's potential document fraud, she said. Mrs. Peton has opened herself up to both civil and criminal liability. What do you recommend? I asked. Patricia's smile was slow and shark-like. First, we file a formal complaint with the county regarding the boundary discrepancies. Then, we request all documentation tied to your property, both from the HOA and the county. If there's fraud involved, we'll find it. 2 weeks later, Patricia called. Her voice practically vibrated with excitement. You're not going to believe this, she said. The HOA's internal maps don't match the official ones filed with the county. Someone altered the digital boundaries to include about 40 extra properties, yours included. Someone being Karen? Sarah asked. Correct, Patricia replied. The changes happened 2 years after she became HOA president. She's been collecting dues and issuing fines to people who were never part of the association. That's not just fraud, it's racketeering. The next day, we filed our complaint. What followed was a full-blown county investigation. Investigators interviewed dozens of homeowners, cross-referenced financial records, and analyzed multiple versions of the boundary maps. As the news tightened, Karen's behavior became more erratic. She sent us threatening letters signed by the HOA's lawyer, who turned out to be her brother-in-law. She held HOA meetings titled "The Mitchell Problem." She even tried to get the local paper to run a story about outsiders threatening community values. But the evidence was too strong to bury. Investigators discovered Karen had personally altered the HOA's digital maps, extending the borders well beyond their legal limits. Over 6 years, she had collected more than $200,000 in unauthorized dues and fines. The County Board of Supervisors called an emergency hearing. The small meeting room was standing room only, packed with furious homeowners clutching binders full of bogus citations. Karen sat at the defendant's table, her usual polish slipping, blazer wrinkled, makeup smeared, hands shaking. The board chairwoman didn't mince words. "Mrs. Peton, the evidence shows a clear and repeated pattern of fraud and abuse of power. Effective immediately, the Pine Ridge Lakeside HOA is ordered to cease all activity involving properties outside its originally filed boundaries. Furthermore, all improperly collected dues and fines must be refunded with interest." But it didn't end there. "This matter is also being referred to the district attorney for criminal prosecution," the chairwoman added. "Forging official documents is a felony." Karen made a strangled noise, half gasp, half shriek. "You can't do this. I've worked for years to maintain property values. These people don't understand what it takes to run a proper community. You've extorted money from dozens of families under false pretenses," the chairwoman replied coolly. "You're lucky if fraud charges are the only thing you face." The room erupted in applause as sheriff's deputies escorted Karen out. But the real satisfaction came 2 weeks later when the official charges were announced: 37 counts of fraud, 1 count of racketeering, and multiple counts of falsifying legal documents. Sarah and I were sitting on the porch when we got the news. Tom texted, "Turn on Channel 9. You're going to want to see this." We flipped on the TV just in time to see a local reporter standing outside the courthouse, the wind catching her hair. In a stunning development, she announced, "Former HOA President Karen Peton has been found guilty on all charges. She has been sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay $450,000 in restitution to the affected homeowners." The screen cut to footage of Karen being led away in handcuffs, her expression stunned, like she couldn't comprehend that her little empire had finally crumbled. "I'm innocent," she screamed at the cameras. "Without me, property values will plummet. The community will fall apart." But no one was listening anymore. Her reign hadn't ended in revolution or fire, it ended with the simple, powerful act of someone finally standing up and saying, "Enough." The last shot before the news cut to commercial showed Karen stumbling on the courthouse steps, one heel snapping clean off as she was led to a waiting police car.